You know, I figured it'd be fitting to start the video with a nice, energized, barbaric screen considering the context of the video, but then I realized that could be hazardous depending on where your volume was at. But now that you have the volume set,
perfection.
hello, nuts and nerds, and welcome back to a Squirrel Plays. Today we're going to be talking about barbarians. Sort of. We're actually going to be building one, and nuts because Peter put out the call for a neat little challenge for everyone to make a barbarian using their own homemade TTRPG system and then make a video about it. So here we are. Problem is I got a time limit on this one. It's got to be less than 10 minutes, meaning I got to get to it.
Just keep it short, under 10 minutes, maybe, 5-6 minutes. Under 10 minutes.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
Buckle up, boyos, because I'm about to get demonetized for whipping out these nuts. Alright, so first I have to give a quick recap about nuts so the character building even makes sense. Luckily, this part should be easy. Unluckily, however, I have been working on rewording some of the things in this game so that they will both follow more of a theme, as well as hopefully make more sense. Nothing is changing mechanically, although I should probably point out that my original video on it is out of date. That's why I titled it Work in Progress. See, I thought ahead. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to use the wording from the version that is currently available for you to download and play. Or at least most of the wording. Anyway, it's really simple. Nuts uses a D12 for everything, and players can add additional D12s to the roll to improve their odds by consuming their skill dice, taking the highest die rolled as a result. It's meant to be a very loose, open-ended type of game, meaning the flavor you give your character is extremely important. There are skills to choose from, albeit just a small handful, but their main purpose is to support the flavor you've given your character and a way to make them function mechanically. They're not there for exploiting or combining to make something busted. Players and monsters both only have a handful of HP. Monsters deal 1 HP worth of damage with each attack, but some may attack more than once. Players typically deal 1 damage and 2 on a crit, but as you'll soon see, there are ways to do a little bit more. And if doing 1 damage back and forth sounds boring, that's because it would be if that's all you did. However, the flavor that goes with that damage is very important because that's what will affect the current scene and narrative. And that's important because Nuts does this neat little thing where the difficulty is constantly changing to match said narrative. Every action you take requires a challenge roll, and that challenge roll value can change with every single action taken. Just because it was a 6 to hit the goblin at the start of the fight doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. It could go up or it could go down, just depends on how things go. And I think that's good enough, so let's go make a barbarian. Okay, Nuts has 3 game modes, but we'll be using Peanut mode as it is the one that gets used in all the streams and is pretty much how Nuts was originally designed. The first part of making a character is filling out some basic information and is what I originally called your gifts, since they were the things that were special and unique to you. It was your anatomy, equipment, and background, and could be pretty much whatever you wanted so long as the GM was cool with it. However, I am currently in the process of changing it to Nut because, jokes. But also because I can change the words to nature, utilities, and tail, which is too good to pass up. Still functions the same though. Now, since I can't draw for beans, I like to come up with a general idea for a character in my mind, then find a picture that's close to what I want. I'll then work backwards from the picture, making character information match the picture instead of the other way around. So that means we're going to be working with this absolute beauty. Isn't he great? I should also clarify that when playing Nuts, you do not have to be a squirrel, despite what a lot of people think. It just always seems to happen that way. Anyway, for nature, obviously it is an anthropomorphic squirrel. Yeah, you like that? I know some big words. But that means he'll get some squirrely features like being able to safely fall long distances. He's also got some wicked looking teeth and claws, as well as a ridiculously muscular body because, of course, this is a barbarian after all. For utilities, all he's got is torn rags and this gigantic makes no sense but we love it anyways axe, so that's super easy. And for tail, as in story, not this fluffy thing back here, this is where we learn a little more about him. You know how squirrels usually bolt at the first sign of danger and zip right up a tree? I'm going to say this guy does the exact opposite. When he sees danger, at least in the form of an opponent he can fight, he rushes right towards it and won't stop until either him or the enemy stops breathing. He'll become hyper-focused and will drive himself to exhaustion pursuing and trying to kill the alleged danger. So instead of my squirrely brain that gets distracted by every little thing known to man, he'll snap his attention to the threat and can't be distracted from it. And that's the nut, which means it's time to pick some skills, which I really want to call shells because they're kind of hollow and require you to fill them with the nut information you just made. Aren't I clever? We get 3 skill points to invest, and I'm going to dump every single one of them into Hard Hitter. This makes our attacks deal 2 damage each, which is already pretty significant, but that also makes our crits do 3, and that's... yeah, that's a lot of damage. Also, if we roll a crit while defending ourselves, we damage our attacker for 1 point, which means we're just going to do all the damage all the time. And if you're wondering why everybody wouldn't pick this skill anyway, let me remind you that your skill dice are pretty much your lifeline and are a limited resource. With that in mind, note that this skill has absolutely no method whatsoever of managing those skill dice. All it does is consume and burn them away for extra damage, which is perfect for the more berserker type of barbarian I want to make. But the question is, what does this look like in an actual game? Looks a lot like liking and subscribing. Ha-ha! Slamming some skins, squirrel. All right, teamwork makes the dream work. Let's go, baby.
Time for foot slogging, boys!
Nuts is extremely rules light, meaning the GM has a lot of wiggle room. The more detail you give your character, the more the GM has to work with. And with the challenge roll being able to change at every action, things can get pretty interesting. So if I were the GM and had a player using this squirrely barbarian, the first thing I would do is make the giant axe both extremely beneficial and a hindrance at the same time. The squirrel will always do the 2 and 3 points of damage, but if he had the axe in hand, I would allow it to cleave into adjacent enemies. That could either apply additional damage to them or just make them tumble over. The axe, combined with his barbaric strength, would likely break other weapons and destroy shields, depending on the success of the rolls. This would lead to enemies being exposed for easier follow-up attacks, either from him or another player, and that's assuming the axe didn't just finish them off in a single swing. This terrifying axe demolishing enemies, along with the squirrel's hyper-focus and amazing scream, would surely demoralize other enemies on the field and cause them to run away in fear, giving your teammates an advantage. The downside is the axe is going to weigh him down because it's so large and heavy. He won't be able to cover as much ground, he'll struggle with climbing, and he won't get that squirrely feature of being able to fall long distances so long as he's hanging on to this thing. But if he drops the axe, not only will he be faster, but he'll be able to scale larger creatures. He can use his claws and teeth to do the same amount of damage, but it'll be at a single target only and won't have as much narrative destructive force. Also, if he is without axe, he'll be extremely good at grappling similar-sized opponents due to his speed and strength. And I think this would give the players a fun way to play by being able to switch between having the destructive axe in hand and throwing it to the ground to speed around the battlefield and jump from one target to another. I feel like tossing your weapon down and lunging barehanded at your enemy is a very barbarian thing to do. And of course, there are other ways you can do it because Nuts very much gives you that freedom. You might have it in such a way that when the barbarian takes damage, he can only ignore the pain for so long before it becomes a real problem due to his lack of armor. Or something totally different. As a matter of fact, you can tell me down in the comments below how you'd handle it at your table, but I gotta get out of here because I think I'm about out of time already. So that's my entry to the design challenge. This was a lot of fun, and I'd like to see more things like this where everyone gets to show off their own systems. I'm curious to see what Peter puts together with all the submissions, and I don't envy him for all the work he's given himself. However, even though the rule was this video had to be under 10 minutes long, I'm going to make it exactly 9 minutes and 59 seconds just to be a pain in his butt. And since my outro is 15 seconds long, I think I need to end it right about here.